Hello everyone, this is Jim with automaticpoker.com, author of the book Automatic Poker, making a video to discuss what I feel are the 7 keys to playing better poker. Specifically, I'm going to focus on cash games, but the concept in this video will apply to pretty much any poker game you play, whether it be tournaments, sit and goes, or any form of cash game. If you aren't familiar with my book, you can pick up the ebook for $7.99, $7.95, something in that range on my website, automaticpoker.com. You can also find it on Amazon. I prefer you buy it through my website because I think I get a larger cut, which is small enough as it is. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Um, but getting started, if you happen to see that graph in the middle of your screen, that's my actual graph from 50NL. I think it's important to show you guys that because otherwise, how are you going to know to believe what I'm saying? I could just be some schlub that just thinks he knows what he's talking about. Which I'm not saying that I know everything, but I know a little bit. If anybody's got a graph like that, has to know something about poker. But getting started, um, if I can get this video to work, most people have trouble just knowing where to get started. Um, it's a common question. Where the heck do I get started learning in poker? There's so much information out there. A lot of it's good, a lot of it's mediocre, some of it's just crap. And sifting through all that can be pretty dang difficult. My philosophy is that you should treat poker just like you treat any other game or sport or any kind of skilled endeavor. And start off, with the very simple. You want to play sound fundamentals poker, especially in the beginning. And in order to do that, you have to know the fundamentals. So you need to, if you already are a player, I recommend simplifying, getting to the fundamentals, getting back to the fundamentals, or learning the fundamentals. And by doing that, you'll be shedding a lot of the leaks that you have. And I'm going to now go over the 7 keys to stronger poker. I've been thinking about this all day. I think this video has been in the works for a while. I kind of just had some ideas today on what, if I could tell a new player or a player that's struggling, just a few things to instantly help their game. Of course, I didn't know it was 7 when I started. I just made a little list in about 5 or 10 minutes, and it turned out to be a full page. And I broke it into 7 little parts, and this is unscripted, so I'm just going to go through each one, and just whatever comes out, comes out. Number 1, choose the appropriate buy-in. It's not 100% necessary, especially when you're learning, to just instantly follow in the footsteps of what people are telling you, maybe on forums or in word of mouth, that you have to play for 100 big blinds, or it's not really poker, or you're stunning your growth as a player. Or some people just become completely obnoxious if you choose to play any buy-in other than 100 plus. Some of the it's pretty harsh the way they treat players that play less than 100 big blinds. With that being said, even though there is a stigma out there, you need to think about this in practical terms. Buying in for 100 big blinds can put you in a lot of difficult spots that you may not be equipped to handle. New players especially, for one example, getting to the river and you don't know whether to bet or not a lot of times, even though you think you might have the best hand. A fear of being put to a test sometimes stops players from value betting the river when they really should be. Or when you face a big raise on the river for the rest of your stack. A lot of players are lost, and they'll make either a bad decision by calling, which is usually the bad play if you don't have the nuts. River raises usually mean the nuts, everybody knows that, but your first mistake was not betting the river. Your first mistake was buying in for 100 big blinds in the first place. So why not choose something that simplifies everything while you learn the game? I recommend people play a smaller stack when they're learning the games. big enough that you can play 3 streets of poker. So I recommend 30 big blinds. 20 is a little bit short. 40 and you're getting into more uh, mid-stack play, which can still give you some fairly difficult decisions. 30 seems to be the middle ground where you raise to 2 or 3 big blinds, you bet 4 or 5 on the flop, 10 on the turn, and then you shove the rest on the river. If you think about the big pots you play or the average large pots you play, you're almost never putting more than 30 big blinds in unless you have the absolute nuts. Putting more than 30 big blinds in, or 30% of your stack, without a big hand usually is a mistake. So, that's not the exact reason I started playing with 30 big blinds. It's kind of funny how I started. I'm not going to go into that story right now. But in a nutshell, I wanted to try something different with a smaller bankroll. The minimum buy-in on the site I was playing, which was the Cake Poker Network, I think it was Juicy Stakes Poker, was 30 big blinds. So I just threw 30 big blinds on there and began playing to try and build a bankroll up with a smaller bankroll after Black Friday. Anyways, I think I talk about this in another video, so I'm not going to go into it. But turns out 30 big blinds seem to be what I feel is the ideal starting stack for new players or players that are learning. Number 3, follow the fundamentals. There's 3 key fundamentals I believe in poker. The first being position. Playing more hands in position, less hands out of position. Everybody knows this is important, but very few players actually follow this. They make way too many calls out of position. They raise completely the wrong hands from early position. And it just makes life difficult on you from the outset before you even get any further in the hand of the flop or whatever. Which leads us to initiative. By playing in position more often, you're giving yourself the chance to have initiative more often. Although the two are exclusive of each other, but they all do tie. These two fundamentals do tie in, just as all fundamentals tie in with each other. But initiative is just having control of the hand. You were the aggressor on the prior street, pre-flop, on the flop, turn. If you don't have initiative, you don't have control of the hand, and you're losing out on fold equity. I'm not going to cover fold equity. If you don't know what that is, I think I covered it before. And that leads us to the third fundamental, which is pressure. By keeping pressure on people, you're always giving yourself more than one chance to win the hand. You can bet, they can fold. If you don't maintain pressure and initiative on players, you're losing out on fold equity, which it's almost impossible to put into the correct words how important it is to have initiative and pressure to gain that dead money, those red line earnings. Anyways, I'm not going into specifics. I'm just laying out the 7 keys that I feel. If you don't know these fundamentals, I've covered them in a prior video. Watch my videos. I'll go into more depth, and I definitely cover these in my book in great depth. Number 4, you need to know what board textures mean. You need to know how to play particular hand strengths on particular boards. I break down board textures in a very black and white terms. Either the board's wet or it's dry. Now, of course, there's all boards in between, neutral. But it helps just to think in your head, okay, I'm playing a wet board. Okay, I'm playing a dry board. I'm playing a wet board for this opponent's range. I'm playing a dry board for this opponent's range. Because it affects all of your decisions. Most specifically, it affects your decisions when you actually have a strong hand. When the board is wet, typically more ranges will connect with that board. So you want to play your strong hands much quicker and faster because there's going to be more hands that are likely to pay you off, so why not bet bigger and make those hands pay more? And also, a lot of people, by the time you get to the river, you're either going to have a made hand or you're not going to have a hand. But on the flop and turn, bad players will call bets regardless of how big or small those bets are, if they have the potential to improve their hand. The most obvious case is on a flush draw. If your opponent has a flush draw on the flop and he's a bad player, he's going to call that flop no matter what. So as a short stack, you want to get the money in on the turn on a wet board because he's still going to have that flush draw on the turn. Now I'm speaking in specific terms here, but really it's more in a general sense. His range is more likely to commit on the turn on wet boards than it is on the river. So you want to get the money in as fast as possible. If you get to the river and you've played your hand slowly or bet small along the way, whether the flush comes in, the draws come in, whatever, the range improves or not, you're less likely to get paid off by worse hands on the river if the flop and turn were wet boards. So as a short stack, bet big on the flop, shove all in on the turn, take the tough decisions out of the game. When the board is dry, less strong hands are going to connect with that board. Usually if a hand does connect with a dry board, it's a very strong hand. Otherwise they're going to have a weak hand, maybe a hand with showdown value. So you typically want to play your strong hand slower because you want to give those showdown value hands a chance to give you a couple streets of value. So when your opponents are less likely to connect with a board and your hand is in less danger of being beaten on the turn, then you can bet smaller. So spread your betting out over 3 streets. Bet small on the flop, small on the turn, get it in on the river on a dry board. And you'll find that you are getting more value from those strong hands against an overall weaker range. Moving on to number 5. This is huge. This is what defines a strong player from a bad player. This is the defining characteristic. Playing with aggression, not playing passively. If you're one of those guys that just likes to call, and just try and make hands to win at poker, you need to try something else. If you can't get past the passive play, you need to be playing a different game, because you're going to lose money in poker by playing passively. You want to stay in control, use initiative and pressure. You want to be the one forcing the action. You don't want to be the one being led around on a leash. If you cannot maintain control, you're better off just getting out of the hand, checking, folding, whatever. Get rid of the damn call button. It's the best way to stop playing passively. You should either be betting or raising on almost all of your decisions. If calling should always be the last, you need to have a very good reason to call. You need to have significant implied odds, or maybe you're slow playing against a super aggressive player with a made hand. That would be a reason to use your call button. But those situations are few and far between, and generally you should be playing aggressively or not playing at all. I recommend you learn about implied odds. Once again, I cover this in my book. When implied odds situations are good, when they're bad. As a short stack especially, you need significant implied odds to use your call button, because you're just never going to have the right price, or you're very seldom going to have the right price to call just to try and make a hand on the next street. So learn about implied odds before you use that call button. If you threw out your call button and never used it at all, you could still win at poker. Number 6, learn to think in ranges. A range is the possible hands an opponent could have on any straight, and it's the hands you could potentially have as it relates to what your opponent feels you have. Now that's getting into level 2 play, which you don't really have to worry about with most opponents. But thinking in ranges allows you to optimize your actions. And especially when it comes to bet sizing. If you can put your opponent on a range of hands, and you don't even have to pick specific hands. Ranges aren't really always about that. It's more, does that range connect well with this board? Do I feel my opponent has a strong or a weak range here? If you can just get it down to strong or weak or mediocre as it connects to a board, it'll improve your bet sizing significantly. We've already talked about textures and how you want to bet big with strong hands on wet boards. And the reason that is because your opponents have ranges and they connect better with wet boards and not as well with dry boards. Well, you need to think about this on all streets, pre-flop and post-flop. What is my betting pattern, or how am I going to bet here based on what my opponent has? Because it just simplifies and helps you. Because bet sizing is one of the toughest things for especially beginning players and players that don't have a lot of experience. This is one of the toughest things: is how much to bet. Some players, I mean, even top professionals, they'll go with a standard, 2/3 or 3/4 size bet almost all the time, or half pot or whatever, and they'll always fall back on that, and that's good to do. But you definitely don't want to have a one-size-fits-all mentality. Always be thinking about your bets, and that starts with thinking in ranges. Um, and this also relates to calling choices, whether you think a situation is good or bad. If your opponent's stronger, and then your implied odds are improved because he's more likely to pay you off if you do hit your hand. If your opponent is fairly weak and he's betting at you, your best choice to either raise or fold there, because if he's not likely to have a good hand that's going to pay you off, even if you do hit your big draw or whatever, then your implied odds are low, and calling is therefore not nearly as good as if your opponent was strong. So against strong players, against strong ranges, you have better implied odds. Against weak ranges, you have worse implied odds. I don't feel like I've covered this completely, but it's just something to think about and to focus on as something to improve your game. So start thinking in ranges, stop thinking in absolutes, and things will become much clearer for you. And lastly, this is more of the mental side of poker. Do not be results oriented. You should be focusing during your sessions on making good decisions, focusing on reacting to your opponents, exploiting your opponents, and forget about short-term results. Short-term results are for weak players. If you care about any decision that you just made, or you actually are affected by a big pot that you lost, or if you're affected by a big pot that you just won emotionally, then you need to readjust the way you think about things. As a poker player, you need to always be thinking about the long term, because the short term, as long as you're making good decisions, the short term just does not matter. If you play enough hands to get to the long term, just making good decisions and outplaying your opponents will eventually lead to profit for you. The short term can be a bitch. Every poker player knows that. But the short term is what keeps the weak players coming back. They're here to gamble. They want to win that giant pot, and they're gonna call you down to get to that big pot. They're going to gamble. They're going to put their money in bad over and over again. And sometimes they're going to win. Sometimes they're going to win for extended periods of time. But that's good, because it's going to keep them coming back, and it's going to make you win in the long term when they keep making all these bad decisions. In summary, if I had to summarize this video in 3 words, they would all be the same words: simplify, simplify, simplify. Get back to the fundamentals. Learn the fundamentals if you don't know them already. Pick up my book. I hate to keep plugging my book like this, but my book is designed to get you started on a sound footing as far as fundamental poker goes. I go into depth on, give you examples in comparison with other sports. Then I lay out the fundamentals. I tell you the why, and then I give you a chart to follow that has you playing with sound fundamentals in the beginning. I'm going to show you everything you need to do to play with sound fundamentals. And once you have those fundamentals down, you can begin expanding your poker game, your repertoire, learning more advanced concepts, and using those concepts to vary from your standard fundamental play when it's necessary against the right opponents. I just discussed that. Now I'm going to make a series of playing videos in which I play generally 4 tables at once. I'll discuss my play, and you'll find that complicated decisions are really not as frequent as you might think when you're playing a 30 big blind stack, especially. When you're following the fundamentals, you're thinking ahead about what's going to happen in the future if I make a particular play. And once you get to that situation, you're not going to be surprised. If you're getting surprised and not knowing what you're going to do when a situation arises, if you don't instantly know what you're going to do or have the correct thought process to think through that situation, then you need to work on your fundamentals, because you probably did something earlier in the hand that led you to this situation that's so quote unquote tough. So as you watch my videos, pay close attention to how I'm always following the fundamentals, and even if I vary from those fundamentals, I always fall back on them when I have a tough decision, which is of course few and far between. Now, I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you made it all the way through, congratulations. I know this isn't the most exciting stuff in the world. Professional poker, strong poker, is not exciting poker. It's not something that your average recreational player is going to be interested in, which is great, because that means there's always going to be players you can win money from. Players that are not following the fundamentals and do not have discipline in their game are going to give you money over and over and over again. So if you have the discipline to follow these concepts and the fundamentals and hone them into your game, you're going to derive fun from the game from a different source. You're going to derive your fun from the game because you're going to be making a lot of money. And making money is what makes poker fun for me, and it should be what makes poker fun for you. Thanks for watching. I look forward to talking to you guys in the future. If you want to contact me, I do answer my emails. I'm not arrogant, although some people have said I sound that way, and it's not intentional, trust me. Just email me at jim@automaticpoker.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future videos or anything that you didn't understand in this one, I am always here. And if you pick up my book, great. Give me an email, let me know you picked it up, let me know what you think. Review it for me. Guys, I would love if you guys would do an Amazon review or something for me, because we need to get some reviews in, or I'm not going to sell any of these things. I appreciate your time, guys, and good luck at the tables, and I'll talk to you later.